I want to start this video with what has happened so far, which is twofold. First, we've seen many states enact legislation which either severely restricts women's access to abortion or will severely restrict women's access to abortion. If we look at states such as Kentucky and Mississippi, for example, they have decided to restrict time to when abortion can take place to 15 weeks after conception. If we look at Texas and Oklahoma, these states have restricted time to when abortion can take place to 6 weeks after conception. And there are also many states as well throughout the Midwest and the South, such as Louisiana, Missouri, and Arkansas, which have trigger ban laws in place, which will either immediately ban abortion if Roe v. Wade is overturned, or will severely restrict abortion in these states if Roe v. Wade is overturned. Now, the reason that I bring this up is because there was recently a draft majority opinion leaked by Politico from the Supreme Court, which has stated that Roe v. Wade is to be overturned, given that the right to abortion is not explicitly stated in the Constitution, and that the original ruling was quite liberal in its interpretation of the Constitution. And with these events that have transpired thus far, the future to the right to access to abortion in the United States appears to be both quite dubious and grim. And this brings us to the question of, with Roe v. Wade overturned, what will the future of abortion in America look like? What is likely to transpire is that given that the Supreme Court currently has a conservative majority of 6 conservative justices to 3 liberal justices, I would argue that it is quite plausible that in the next couple of months, or even weeks, that Roe v. Wade will be overturned. Once this occurs, we are likely to see even more red states begin to severely restrict or simply outright deny women access to abortion, especially considering that many red states in the South and Midwest have trigger ban laws in place. Whereas in pro-choice blue states such as California, New York, and Illinois, we are likely to see abortion laws currently in place remain intact, at least for the present moment. Now, let's take a moment and think about what could still happen. Firstly, the conservative majority on the Supreme Court may not stop at the overruling of Roe v. Wade. If the reasoning behind the overruling of Roe v. Wade is that the right to abortion is not explicitly stated in the Constitution, then the right of same-sex couples to marry, the right of interracial couples to marry, and the right of couples to use contraception could all be overruled by the conservative majority using the same reasoning as the one they are using on Roe v. Wade, as none of these are explicitly stated in the Constitution either. Secondly, if Republicans manage to become the majority in both chambers of Congress, then they could attempt to pass legislation which makes abortion illegal at the federal level, as the previous decision of the Supreme Court on Roe v. Wade can no longer prevent Republicans from doing so. However, there is a possible silver lining here, as the 2022 midterm elections could end up being decided by the overturning of Roe v. Wade. If the Democratic Party's constituency becomes galvanized enough, then this could cause them to show up in droves during the elections to put a substantial number of Democratic candidates into Congress as a way to attempt to ensure the protection for abortion at the state level. And if the midterm elections allow for enough Democrats to become the majority in both chambers of Congress, then Democrats could possibly succeed in codifying access to abortion into federal law. With the strong possibility of Roe v. Wade being overturned, there is one important question which needs to be answered, which is, where do we go from here? And I would argue that this problem needs to be addressed in 4 different ways. First, we need to strongly encourage the use of effective contraception options, as these will become incredibly important for people in states where abortion is severely restricted or outright banned, as this will be the best way to ensure that the negative impact caused by these severe restrictions and bans in red states is dampened so long as contraception remains available in these states. Second, if we want to restore proper access to abortion at the state level, then we will need to vote in as many Democrats into the state legislatures as possible, as it will be by electing as many Democrats as possible to the state legislatures that we may be able to reverse the trigger ban laws that come into effect after Roe v. Wade is overturned. And thirdly, people who wish to restore proper access to abortion at the federal level will need to vote in as many Democrats into Congress as possible, as a substantial majority will be needed in order to be able to vote and establish federal laws which protect access to abortion at the federal level. And finally, to ensure that access to abortion can unequivocally be considered a right, we as a nation need to enshrine right to access to abortion as a constitutional amendment. And the second and third ways that I have mentioned here of addressing the overturning of Roe versus Wade are going to be critical to achieve, as we will need the approval of 2/3 of both chambers of Congress and 3/4 of the state legislatures to ensure the right to access to abortion is enshrined in the Constitution. Because if we can't get that, then there isn't really a way to do it. I have a strong feeling that I know that what will be said here in response to the fourth way of addressing the overturning of Roe versus Wade is that this is something that is easier said than done. And people are right to say this. It will be easier said than done. But if we truly wish to offer the greatest protection possible for the right to abortion, it cannot simply be protected by the federal and state legislatures. It needs to be protected by the Constitution itself if we as a nation truly wish to make it so that it is as difficult as possible for the right to access to abortion to be challenged. And I know that the future of access to abortion in America looks quite grim, but hopefully we as a nation will weather this storm. I want to thank everyone who watched this video all the way through to the end, and if you enjoyed this video and you're watching on YouTube, then please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And if you have any thoughts on the video itself, then please let me know in the comments down below. And if you're watching this video on Facebook or Twitter, then you can let me know by directly messaging me on either one of these platforms.